Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Be Bold America. I'm your host, Jill Cody, and our program today will be on an intense topic. The Danish climate activist Kasper Benjamin Reimer Bohorskov stated regarding the crisis with our Earth's climate, quote, "We are not prepared, have no plan, don't know how bad it's going to get, and have no time to waste. Everything and everyone is at risk." Our program today is Everything, Everywhere, and All at Once. Our planet is drastically changing, but you won't see it on the nightly news. The underestimated extreme heat occurrences, the rising ocean acidity that is scaring scientists, the unchecked deterioration of biodiversity loss and water and food crises around the world are almost beyond our capacity to correct. Why is this existential threat to humanity not being covered by the media as if everything did not depend on what we do next? As the European Environmental Agency reported, quote, "We are entering an era of total climate effery, and you know what the F stands for. We have big things to do." Today's bold guest will share key indicators of ecosystems in decline and share her insights as a broadcast journalist insider about why the corporate news gatekeepers are only covering the tip of melting icebergs. Betsy Rosenberg has been a career broadcast journalist, beginning with a stint at ABC Sports during the Olympics while in college. Her first on-air position was with CBS Radio, where she worked for 2 decades as a reporter for KCBS in San Francisco, and later became a network anchor in New York City. After 20 years of covering breaking news, she left KCBS to cover environmental challenges and solutions as an independent radio host and producer. Betsy conducted hundreds of interviews with leading eco-innovators and experts on the Air America network and later on internet radio, with an extra emphasis on the worsening climate crisis. In addition to public speaking, Betsy has written articles for HuffPost and Medium and has contributed to 2 books, including Climate Abandoned, We're on the Endangered Species list, that I edited and contributed to as well. Most recently, Betsy was co-founder and host on GreenTV.com. Betsy lives in Austin, Texas. Welcome to Be Bold America, Betsy.
Thank you, Jill. Austin is the center of the zone of totality, eclipse mania, which I'm calling apocalypse, because who knows, maybe nature will decide just to keep it dark. You know, I wouldn't blame.
Well, I was going to ask you.
Or Earth.
I know. I said, I was wondering if you had that eclipse fever. The media seems to have nothing else to talk about. And if any aspect of the climate crisis got as much attention as this eclipse has gotten already, we'd already be better placed educating the population.
Hey, if climate change and environmental news got a fraction of the attention the royal family, not even in our country,
that's right,
we might have a chance.
Betsy, how can the news media not be covering the biggest, if it bleeds, it leads news story in history? I know you felt alone in your criticism of the mainstream media with their lack of coverage of the crisis on the climate. How has Media Matters of America quantified that, or how have you felt alone? What changes have you seen? You've been shouting this a long time.
You know that, Jill.
I do.
We took Al Gore's climate reality training early 2007 is when I took it. I think you were.
Same. I think we were in the same class. Yeah.
So that's a long time to know what Al Gore knows.
17 years. That was 17 years ago. Mm-hmm.
That's right. And of course, things have only gotten worse on the climate and ecological front. But there is some good news. But before I get to that, you decided to start with media. Yes, that is my obsession. People who know me well, including my family knows me too well, knows that I'm kind of obsessed. And that's because my background, I've really only held one job in my entire career because this environmental media quest does not pay. In fact, I had to pay for most of it. But problem is that the corporate media, especially the news networks, television news networks that I've been trying to break into, I say the green ceiling is twice as thick as the glass ceiling. We have black people on television. We have brown people, as we should. We're the green people, meaning, the contributors, the commentators that are, full-time or showing up frequently. They have climate scientists on, like Michael Mann and Katharine Hayhoe, and maybe Bill Nye. But first of all, it's not a diverse crowd at all of experts, and it's not often enough. I have some numbers to back that up, but I just want to tell you why I have been so focused on this piece of it, which again is because I worked for CBS Radio the first half of my career and had to leave because I could not get environmental stories on the air. My news director famously, back at KCBS years ago when I started Trash Talk Earth Day 1997, so this Earth Day I think will be my 28th year of preaching the green gospel. He said, I was pitching a feature, 1-minute feature called Trash Talk, because I'm obsessed with waste, because a planet is a terrible thing to waste, right? Not to mention energy, water, food. And so I wanted to do a feature on that. And he said, I give you 3 weeks, Betsy, then you'll run out of waste reduction tips. 10 years later, but midway through, I went from Trash Talk to Eco Talk when I realized that garbage was not our biggest environmental problem. It was global warming, which of course we called it back then. And that began my quest to, try to get back on a mainstream platform, but not before I had become sort of an eco-expert because of the experts that I interviewed. Did over 5,000 interviews on climate, but not only climate, because it's all connected. And unfortunately, what coverage there is now, especially on television, of climate news, of course, it's not nearly enough, but they don't connect the dots to, oceans and biodiversity and the extinction crisis. And that's why it's not adequate, and that's why we have an eco-literacy problem in this country. So that has been my primary focus, and so I can talk a little bit more about the latest statistics, which are shocking, truly shocking. So Media Matters of America, they are a progressive watchdog group, and I did interview the person that does a lot of this research, Evlondo Cooper, one of my last interviews on Green TV. So it was like last December, we were talking about how much coverage there was or was not of COP28. And they have the tally in mid-March of the previous year's coverage. Would you like to guess, Jill, or if I told you, pretend you don't know, how much of the entire coverage from the broadcast and cable news networks was devoted to climate change, just climate,
so
let alone oceans?
You told me, so I'll pretend I don't know. What was it, Betsy?
Less. I hope everybody's sitting down, or maybe stand up and start screaming from your rooftops that don't have solar panels on, probably. Maybe this crowd does. I hope so. Less than 1%. Let me say that again, slowly, for emphasis. Less than 1% of all coverage from ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, MSNBC was devoted to climate news. Now, what could possibly go wrong? Now, imagine if they covered it like they covered the COVID crisis, which, of course, was an emergency. And guess what? So is our collapsing climate and other ecological.
So did Donald Trump get the other 99%?
and still is. Yes. That's what's so surreal. And it's beyond, because, of course, if God forbid he wins, it is really all over. I mean, I said that back in 2016, but now we're in much worse shape, right? Because he's proud of the fact that he will dismantle the EPA in his first day of office when he's dictator. Maybe first day, maybe continuing, wants to get us out of the Paris Agreement. I don't know about you, Jill, but when I heard that news back when in June of his first year in office, that he was pulling us out of the Paris Agreement, I literally had to pull over. I remember I was driving on Lombard Street in San Francisco and cry. I put my head to the steering wheel because I knew what this portended. And it was a nightmare. More than 100 environmental pieces of legislation were rolled back under him. That is a problem in and of itself, that one of our two main political parties doesn't even think it's a problem, let alone focusing on solutions. So you're going to hear at the end of this, one thing you must do is tell everybody that you know, love, care about, that they must vote, and they must only vote. I don't care what party you vote for, just vote for the one that accepts science, okay? That should make it pretty easy. But I digress. Yeah, but Trump is taking up all the air in the room, all the broadcast air, and when, those of us who know what's really going on, the news that's not getting covered, and then there's other awful news, the invasion of Ukraine and Israel and Gaza, and for those of us who are Jewish, we're just torn into pieces. We're so angry at Netanyahu. Many of us, not to get into this is not about that this hour. And
but
so
your point is that it does take up a lot of attention, a lot of airtime.
Yes.
There are other major, serious, disastrous things happening, and so the climate emergency is on the back burner again.
Again, and pretty much has always been. There's like been a few minutes where we thought we were finally getting our moment, during the COPs and when Obama came in, he was certainly better on climate change. And Joe Biden has been amazing in that he got $376 billion for infrastructure and, EV chargers and basically climate improvements.
Much less than he wanted, though, because of two Democrats.
Exactly, who are really Republicans. Democrats in name only.
Manchin and Sinema, he wanted a lot more and couldn't get it.
Yeah, so when people criticize Biden's climate record, I get really angry because I say, do you think he's king? He's not a dictator. He can't just do what he would like. And again, we have one political party in this country that has been consistently fighting. And none of them, not one Republican in Congress voted for the Climate Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. That should tell you a lot, and it does. So even if we didn't have this political opposition and the fossil fuel industry funding denial and Fox amplifying that denial, we have a Herculean challenge ahead of us, right? I mean, it's still not clear that we're going to make it. And by that I mean whether we aren't going to be seeing loss of life on a widespread scale in the next coming decades, not centuries. There's a whole doomerism crowd. There's a collapse crowd. There's a degrowth crowd. And I read a lot of their stuff on LinkedIn, and I urge everybody else to, because they're not wrong. But it's pretty scary when you see that intelligent people are saying, prepare for this, not just this could happen.
You have talked about, how extreme events, people realize these extreme events are happening, but there's something behind that, the behind the scenes. And it can be very deceiving that more is happening other than just the atmospheric river or the wildfire. What is taking place behind the scenes?
Well, let's start with the bad news, and then we'll talk about the good news, because there is some, okay?
Okay.
I just give you my, and I could go on, but I'll give you my top 5 signs that things are not going so well.
You've got about a couple minutes before our break, so just start.
Okay, I'll speed through them. First of all, the production and use of fossil fuels is still going up, especially here in the U.S., and we have less coal production here and worldwide, but still way too dependent on oil and gas. Climate scientists have issued an urgent call. This is just in the past week, calling for the end of the age of destruction and unchecked capitalism, saying we need to forge a more just and sustainable future. And it is because of these multiple converging crises, of course, climate instability, but also ecological destruction, viral diseases, health crises from pollution and toxic contamination, extractive capitalism. And so they're calling for urgent action needed, but they have been for some time as they raise the volume on their warnings. And poor Antonio Guterres of the UN, he's run out of alarming words, and people still don't seem to be getting it. Okay, so we're also now more than halfway to 2 degrees centigrade of warming from pre-industrial temperatures, and scientists say that is the danger point for civilization, point of no return. Also, I'm sure you know, Jill, but most people don't. Even many environmental activists realize that parts per million of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the safe level is 350 parts per million, and that is why Bill McKibben's group, 350.org, is named that. We're over 425 parts per million. So if anybody's wondering, are we in the danger zone? Yes, we are. And if anyone doesn't believe it, like a lot of people on my Nextdoor app in Texas, Hill Country, Texas, it's not the Bay Area anymore, out of that bubble. Just look outside. I was sparring with a few of them, and during the biggest wildfire in Texas history just a couple weeks ago, and now they found bird flu in birds and cattle and spread to a farmer. Wake up and smell the carbon, people, whether it's in your political ideology or not. And, of course, we're supposed to be cutting our emissions by 50% by 2030. Last time I checked, it's halfway through 2024. We are not on track for that. And the world's oil producers are on track to nearly quadruple their output by the end of this decade from new oil and gas projects.
Well,
so
what I wanted to ask you, too, is to explain why the 350 is so important. But let's take a break. You are listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7, 89.5, and 89.7 FM. Many voices, one station. Listen globally online from the KSQD.org website. Our topic today is Everything, Everywhere, and All at Once. Our planet is drastically changing, but you won't see it on the nightly news. And our guest is Betsy Rosenberg. Betsy is a climate crisis and environmental journalist who is also a local CBS reporter for 2 decades in San Francisco. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Hello, K-Squid listeners. I'm Tom Hartman, and each weekday at 4 p.m., I bring you a different perspective on the news than you're likely to hear on most media outlets. Please join me on KSQD Santa Cruz, your ink spot on the dial for the Tom Hartman program, heard now for the first time ever in the Monterey Bay area at 90.7 FM, weekdays at 4 p.m. That's Progressive Talking Conversation with me, Tom Hartman, weekdays at 4 p.m. on KSQD 90.7 FM. Tag you're it.
What can you do to reunite this country and save our democracy? These heady issues will be discussed on KSQD 90.7 FM, Be Bold America. Be Bold America is a live, bi-weekly talk show for those who are motivated to step out of their daily routine. On Be Bold America, we will be discussing what you can keep doing, stop doing, and start doing to take action. We have big things to do. Every other Sunday at 5 p.m. on K-Squid, Community Radio for the Monterey Bay. We're back. Would you like a friend to hear this interview on Everything, Everywhere, and All at Once? Well, Be Bold America is available as a podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcast platforms. Subscribe for free from your favorite platform or listen on the Be Bold America homepage at the KSQD.org website. Betsy, now just quickly, why is 350 so important? And we're saying 425 that we're at now.
Thereabouts, yeah. It is fluctuating between 423 and 426, so call it, 425.
Right.
But it was not that long ago, it was 411. And in my lifetime, it was 350. And for many, many eons, it was 250. In other words, we're not going up incrementally. We're going up rapid rise.
And 350 is where we're balanced, correct?
That is considered the safe level by climate scientists, experts in their field. A lot of deniers online think they know more than climate scientists somehow. And of course, the greenhouse gases that are most troublesome are CO2 and methane. And there's also, H2O and other things in the atmosphere that can contribute, water vapor. All these people who want to say it's not real will say, oh, it's water. It's the sunspots, natural cycles, which is just not correct. So, yes, we are going up too quickly. So is the temperatures. 2023 was the hottest year on record, and so have January, February, and March been the hottest months on record. So this is not a coincidence. It's a really scary pattern, and it's going to continue. Even if we stopped burning greenhouse gases tomorrow, we still have so much baked into the atmosphere. So it's not like that would stop it. But if we don't start reversing course a lot faster, we're going to be locked in to a very scary future.
Just to interject here, the latest State of the Global Climate Report by the World Meteorological Association says not only was 2023 the hottest year on record, it also punctuated the hottest decade, and they expect for it to become even hotter during 2024.
That's right. And not only was it the hottest, but this probably won't surprise you, but it was also a record-breaking year for billion-dollar weather disasters. So the reason I thought to title this chat, everyone, everything, all at once, is climate change is coming for all of us. That should be clear. I just gave a couple of examples of Texas. I'm from the Bay Area. We have friends who lost their homes and their ranch in the fires in 2017. There were a couple back-to-back. Look at the floods in New York City, really, Vermont. In places where there shouldn't be tornadoes and hurricanes on steroids, which I call horrorcanes. So it should be clear if you just connect the dots a little bit.
Well, in Miami, they have a sea level rise, and they have fish swimming on the streets.
And that actually is true. I was just in Miami a couple of weeks ago, Jill, for Aspen Ideas Climate conference. It's the third annual one, the second one I attended, and they decided to hold it there rather than their usual events. Aspen events are in Aspen, Colorado. But because Miami is ground zero for sea rise level, they decided to hold it there. And should we segue into the good news?
Yes.
Please,
before we melt, we fall off our chair and melt in a puddle.
Yeah, or just, pull the covers up and turn off the radio.
Right.
Okay, so the good news is that these climate conferences that I've been going to for many, many years are getting, first of all, there's more of them. Secondly, they're much better attended. It used to be, maybe dozens. Now there's hundreds, even a couple. There were 2,000 to 3,000 at the latest Aspen Ideas Conference in Miami. And there are a lot of speakers that, are very knowledgeable. The problem is still that it's the choir going to these, people who work in climate activists. And that's good because none of us know as much as we need to know. So information sharing is a good, efficient way, and networking is great for people to find out what others are doing in their field. But let's continue with the good news here before I go off on a tangent. Okay, more cities are becoming bicycle friendly. Amsterdam, of course, is the best in the world. We were there a couple of years ago, and I didn't want to leave because it was so much fun riding around on our bikes. Paris is now claiming that they have more bicyclists in their city than motorists, which is huge. Someone called it a new French Revolution. And in the United States, which is where most of us listening live, there are more and more bike paths. And that's largely, you can thank the bicycle activists, environmental activists in your life. Hopefully you have many, and befriend them if you don't. Also, there's congestion fees, and there's restrictions on SUVs in some places, like New York City. So that is a positive sign. Also, the cost of renewables has come down and continues to come down, and that's, solar, EV prices are coming down. But it's also true that fossil fuel production and use are still going up, so it hasn't yet cut into that. The movement is growing more as more people realize that this is the biggest story of our time, and this is a crisis that could make all others insignificant. People are sort of joining up, and there's now climate jobs websites and organizations and conferences. There's going to be a Climate Week in San Francisco that is put on by Climate Base. And if those listening are interested in maybe recycling their careers, as I did, from going from covering breaking news to covering a breaking planet, there's ways to find out how you can either, tweak your job skills a little bit and take a, bona fide climate job or create one, as I say. Or you can, leave your area that you're working in and start all over in a climate area that needs you. So there's lots of options, and that's relatively new, all these job sites. And like places like Green Biz, they have, a lot of places have job listings now. So there's plenty of places to go if you're looking for that, and I hope you are. So let's see. That was the good news. That was my top 5 anyway. Should we just say a little bit more about media before we turn to some other things, because there's some statistics that I think will bring this home. Okay. And there's not enough climate coverage in everybody's home. So I know a lot of people don't watch TV anymore, especially a lot of young people, but people our age, Jill, baby boomers, at the young end of baby boomers as we are, still watch a lot of TV. 5 million Americans watch the morning shows on CBS, ABC, and NBC. I watch the Today Show. It's just something I've done as a habit when I'm home, and I've done that since college, which was a while ago. And Al Roker is a meteorologist who is mentioning climate change more often than any others, and he has been for quite some time. But a mention is not enough. So Al Roker was at the climate conference in Miami a couple of weeks ago, and he spoke and interviewed Katherine Hayhoe, a climate scientist I had on my show more than a decade ago. Proud of that, before CNN knew of her. He was there at the conference for a couple of days listening to the presentations, but then just a few days later in that same week, there was, which was it? Some climate disaster, but he didn't even mention the connection to climate change. Maybe it was the Texas wildfires. And that's the problem. You got to keep connecting those dots louder and louder. Okay, so with more and more billion-dollar weather disasters, and it being the hottest year, hottest month, you name it, all record-breaking, and that's only going to continue. The fact that it was less than 1% coverage, and that was down climate coverage from the year before. So in 2022, they covered it 25% more than the networks did, corporate networks, in 23. Now, public broadcasting did better than corporate, but they still also went down in their coverage. So this is not a good trend. And if people don't, and then they wonder why they're losing viewers, I'm sure there's other reasons, but, people like us who know that this is big news and they don't see it covered enough, they're going to tune out and tune into, places that are. It's mostly independent, podcasts on climate or environmental newsletters, mostly online. And that's wonderful, and I encourage it. But unfortunately, and this is what I have found, you get the green-minded people who are already pretty knowledgeable and concerned. How do we reach beyond the choir? Well, the only way I know to do that is to get on a mainstream network, and that has proven to be mission impossible. Do you want to know why? Some of the problems that are holding this progress back? Okay. So I can't say for sure. No one has ever admitted this to me, but because I've said I'm a little obsessed with this for a couple of decades, they used to say, and I pitched them all, CNN, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, ABC. I literally have gotten people high up from Jeff Zucker at CNN. I was on Ali Velshi's show on MSNBC, and I tried to see if I could, do more. And what happens is the producers I'm talking to, or people like Ali Velshi, who does cover climate a lot, they're interested. They say, "You're right, Betsy, we need this." But then they go above them, and it stops right there. So the executives at these networks are afraid, and I think they're afraid certainly to hire somebody who actually would tell the truth and connect the dots. And most importantly, focus on solutions. Now, it's true that solutions might include, taking a second look at unchecked capitalism and fossil fuel as a big part of the problem. And they still, of course, have advertisers, the American Petroleum Institute. I just saw one on plastic today, The Wonderful New World of Plastics, brought to you by the American Petroleum Institute. So there's a lot of greenwashing there, and I think that's part of the problem, but they've been saying to me that their viewers were not interested. This is in the past couple of years, and they can no longer say that because the research, mostly coming from Yale Climate Communications and Anthony Lazarowitz, who is wonderful with all these stats. He spoke in Miami, so I've got the latest. 72% of Americans are concerned about climate change, and many of them say they don't know what to do, and they haven't been asked to do anything. That is the case for supporting independent green climate media that is focused on solutions. See, the news networks and even newspapers don't see it as their job, and this I have heard direct quote from the publisher of the San Jose Mercury News. This goes back about 10 years, but I thought, see, they don't think it's their duty to focus on solutions. Maybe on Earth Day they'll have a segment, on morning show or in the newspaper. They think it's up to Greenpeace and NRDC and Earth Justice and Sierra Club to inform their members. But guess what? What's wrong with this picture? Well, their members are people like us who are already losing sleep over this. We need to make people who are not aware of this sleep less so we can sleep more. So they can't say that anymore as an excuse. So I'm tempted to try again. But again, guess how many hours of climate coverage total in 2023?
How many hours?
It was 17 total. That's all of them all together, and that it was 23 hours in 2022.
Of all the networks? Are you talking about all the networks?
Well, so this particular research was on the broadcast networks.
Broadcast networks, ABC, it was 17 CBS, hours.
And yes, as ABC, CBS, NBC, and this is really important, and Fox. Well, guess what? Every time Fox mentions climate change, it's to call it a hoax. And they are still doing that. And I say they should be sued. If they cannot lie about COVID and they cannot lie about election fraud, why are they getting away with murder? Murder because people are dying. They're the most watched network of all, much more than MSNBC and CNN. If you're getting your news from Fox, and Fox says, don't worry about climate change, and that's part of the reason CNN didn't want to cover it, because they had viewers that went back and forth. And if you get anxious about climate change, go to Fox. They'll tell you nothing to worry about. Go about your business. So imagine that less than 1% includes Fox's climate denial, which they are doing up to this day, which most intelligent, educated people who don't watch Fox would not have a clue about. This is how big of a problem we have with the media.
Well, I think that one reason we're not seeing it on the nightly news is because they're profit organizations. That's why they're afraid of talking about it, because they're funded by or supported by big oil. And
that's right.
They are profit-oriented, not information-oriented. And when you say they're afraid to tell the truth or have solutions, that's really depressing.
It is, especially because I think most Americans just assume there's programming somewhere. They just haven't stumbled upon it yet that talks about what to do. And I'm talking on the mainstream networks again, because that is still where the majority of Americans get their news, those who get it from television anyway. And just one little stat here. Only 12% of that not so much climate coverage, only 12% were stories or segments where they even mention fossil fuels, right?
Oh, geez.
So they don't mention the source of the problems. Now, you can hope that most people are aware of that, but certainly not everybody. And also about half of the guests were white men who were guests on a climate segment. Only 10% were women of color. And there was very little discussion of environmental justice or solutions, as I said earlier. So we do have an eco-literacy problem. A climate-savvy public would help us, go a long way towards getting everybody on board, just like we saw happen with COVID. Almost overnight, people's behavior changed because it was clear it was a life-and-death situation. And you know what? Whether it's wearing masks or getting vaccinated, those personal choices have public impact. Well, same with driving a gas guzzler, or being wasteful with your energy, leaving, the air conditioning on all day, whether you're home or not. So there should be laws. There should be laws for people to, tune into their environment and find places where they can learn about this, because every day that we're not reducing our emissions are days that we're going to make our children and grandchildren suffer more. And every parent and grandparent I know loves their children. I just became a grandmother, so if I thought I was going to take it easy and quit, and I started doing this when my daughter was 2, my green programs, she's 29 and has a 5-month-old daughter, my granddaughter. So, this is not enough has changed. Some things have gotten worse. Some things have gotten better, which I've touched on.
Well, I hope people stumble onto this show. You're listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7, 89.5, and 89.7 FM. Many voices, one station. Listen globally online from the KSQD.org website. My guest, Betsy Rosenberg's local connection is that she was a broadcast journalist in California for 2 decades as an on-air reporter for KCBS in San Francisco. We'll be right back after Jim Hightower's commentary titled, How Oily is Big Oil?
If you're concerned about fossil fuels and climate change, consider an energy source that, according to its backers, will make everyday living comfortable and healthier. What is this miraculous substance? Oil. Huh? Yes, that filthy scourge of our planet and health is being ballyhooed as our globe's energy and environmental salvation. By whom? Of course, the American Petroleum Institute, the powerhouse lobbying front for ExxonMobil and other petro-profiteers. API recently bragged that it will pour tens of millions of dollars into a PR blitz during this year's presidential election to demonize clean energy sources and demand that government promote more fossil fuel production. API's campaign slogan is Lights on Energy, but the luminosity of its media message is mighty dim. Start with the fact that big oil has zero public credibility, having routinely gouged us on prices for years and knowingly lied to us for decades about not causing climate change. Second, the demand by oil barons that government quit intruding into the free market is a whiny embarrassment. Hello, for more than a century, oil corporations have gorged on billions and billions of dollars in taxpayer handouts. And they are in line to keep getting $2.5 billion a year in corporate welfare for the next decade. Didn't their mamas ever teach them not to talk with their mouths full? Also pathetic is their partisan wail that President Biden is restricting their production and profits. Hello again. U.S. oil production reached a record high last year. Big oil's profits are soaring, and they're now jacking up our gas prices again. Meanwhile, 2023 was the hottest year our globe ever recorded. This is Jim Hightower saying, let's reflect the heat back on these greed heads. For facts and action items, go to fossilfree4health.org. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you subscribers to Jim Hightower's Lowdown on Substack. Find us at jimhightower.substack.com.
Welcome back. Our topic today is everything, everywhere, and all at once. Our planet is drastically changing, but you won't see it on the nightly news. And our guest is climate activist Betsy Rosenberg. Before we move on, Betsy, do you have any thoughts on Jim Hightower's commentary on big oil? I think you must.
Well, first of all, I love Jim Hightower. It's great to hear him again. Somehow I lost track of him, but he's been at this a long time. I think even longer than I have. Yeah, big oil is a big part of the problem. First of all, Exxon knew. That's become clear. And if that doesn't make you angry, that they did it for profit.
Exxon knew, 3 decades ago or 4 decades ago and did it.
Yes.
Right. That their
oil
product
and gas
was killing the planet. Yes.
That's right. And it's been proven that there was a cover-up, and there's lawsuits now by children who, like our Children's Trust, and some of them are making headway, like in Montana, saying, you cannot destroy our future. Greta Thunberg was just arrested a few times at a protest, and there's all kinds of activity taking place, but still, big oil rules the day. Now, here's what I have to say about big oil, okay? Jane Fonda, God love her, and I just saw her at an event for a fundraiser for her climate PAC. She talks about how fossil fuels is the problem. And she's not wrong, okay? But it's not the only problem. Like I say, media has got a problem too. And I'm hoping to have a phone call with her soon to say she should be blaming media too for the reasons I've talked about, probably ad nauseum just here. But here's the other problem. We're all using fossil fuels. Now, we've driven hybrid or electric vehicles in my family for 20 years. And we, have solar panels, second house that we put them on, and we recycle and compost and all that good stuff. And a lot of people do. But it's not nearly enough. And so we can't just get off fossil fuels overnight. That's not going to happen. So we're all complicit. Not that you should feel guilty, but you should feel compelled to learn about everything you can do. And of course, it's way more than individual behavior, although that's a good place to start. It is necessary, but not sufficient. Of course, we need to put public pressure on any elected representatives to, you should have to pass a test before you run for any office, be it local, regional, or national. And too many of the people, in one particular party are in the pockets of fossil fuel funders, donors to them. And that's why they're not voting for climate action.
Now, Betsy, when you're talking about applying public pressure to our politicians, I just wanted to interject, and it's not a well thought out idea, but I wanted to get your input on this. And it got triggered in me when I learned that the American Bar Association is standing up and holding the lawyers who supported Trump's insurrection accountable. They're holding their members accountable for that. And I don't know that the climate crisis really has its own association. We're very divided with a lot of different 350.org and that organization, and conferences where people are really talking to themselves. And then I was also thinking, the NRA was very successful by grading the politicians, A, for the Republicans who were, having their Christmas cards holding guns, and F's for those who are trying to fight against the NRA. It just seems that we need to have more ideas of being able to hold the politicians accountable.
Well, like the League of Conservation.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a very good example. And the League of Conservation Voters, I'm sure they're still doing it because it's more important than ever. For years, they've been grading politicians on their, environmental record. So that is some place to go to for that information. But even if you don't have time to do your own research, and it's not that I'm biased, although I am, because I'm for politicians and political parties that get that Earth is worth saving. If anyone has a problem with that, see me later. But there's groups like Climate Voice, and Bill Wheel runs that, and he is fabulous. They're working on getting the Chamber of Commerce, which historically has been terrible on, climate action, and many of the companies that belong to the Chamber of Commerce,
the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce,
mm-hmm. Yes, and even the high tech companies that Bill used to work for, like Google and Facebook, they put on a good face that they're for climate action, but they're members of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm not sure their exact status right now, but that is the problem, right? So you can't say one thing to greenwash and impress the public, but then be working, in the back room to undermine that progress. So that we're starting to see more of that. But here's the bottom line. It's got to come from public pressure. And as long as we have one party that is saying, no problem, go about your business, go back to tennis lunch or what have you, your mahjong game, we're just not going to make it. So every person who believes and knows the science, here's what you got. Well, I know you want. Are we ready to get to the things to keep doing, stop doing, and start doing?
Well, we can go to that. Yeah.
Okay, so, well, first of all, start tuning in to shows like Jill's, which obviously everyone who's listening is doing. There's a lot of climate podcasts out there, which there were not like 5 years ago, and even just 3 years ago, 2 years ago, many more now, and support those. There's a lot of environmental climate newsletters online, support them. And whether it's making a donation or just telling everybody you know and love, or even your enemies, about these outlets, and Green TV, which is where I worked for 2.5 years, and there's there's 200 some odd interviews, which are my most recently production under Meet the Solutionaries. We can talk a little bit maybe about why I left that, but to continue with the things to keep doing, support these entities, these green media entities. It is so hard to make it your job, even if it's unpaid, to keep up with the news on what's going on with our biosphere, right? You know that, and it's hard to take that in. And when you care so much, as we activists do, then you try to have an independent green media outlet and try to grow it, like we were really hoping to make Green TV a 24/7 green news network. Why not? Given the plethora of problems, solutions, and solutionaries, and the shortage of time that we have to turn this ship around, which is currently sinking. So I just want to do that shout out for the places and people who are doing the hard work of keeping up with the news so you don't have to, and trying to bring you solutions. And it's a little disheartening when even a lot of my friends and family have not listened to my 5,000 interviews. It's like, hey, guys, I'm doing it for you, not for me. There's a feeling like we do it for ourselves, or it's our passion, it's our pet peeve, that we have a climate problem. No, it's for everybody who eats, breathes, or drinks. Okay, enough of that. We need to stop ignoring the environmental news crises, and that may not be the population listening to this wonderful radio show, either live or after the fact. But, too many people do, and that's where we all have to be ambassadors and speak up. This is everyone's job. And don't let friends, ignore it either, even though it may feel better, easier. It's only making it worse for especially parents and grandparents. It's only making it worse for the next generations. And when you're holding your granddaughter in your arms, like I've been lucky enough to do, you realize this is a future generation. Here it is, flesh and blood. We don't have time to waste. Stop eating so much meat. That is a big ecological problem. It does make a difference. The Colorado River, they've just quantified, I think a half of the water in the Colorado River is going to grow alfalfa, which is what livestock feed on. So that cheeseburger is very thirsty and a water hog, if you will. There's other things that don't drive a gas guzzler. Basically, don't waste energy, food, or water, and don't waste time listening to anybody who doesn't think this is real. Those people are just going to have to be embarrassed, okay? What can you start doing? Well, there's lots of wonderful, as I mentioned, podcasts, and I hope to be starting a new production soon. Stay tuned for that. If you go to BetsyRosenberg.com, that's where my radio shows are archived, and we'll be starting something new soon, maybe Earth Day. And there's great books like Katharine Hayhoe, Saving Us. She says the most important thing you can do is talk about climate change. Yes, she's absolutely right. But before you talk about it, you want to raise your eco IQ a little bit, and that's where some of these places I'm sending you to can help you, be intelligent in that cocktail party climate conversation.
And the book you contributed to, Climate Abandoned, we're on the endangered species list, is a good start. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was that 5 years ago this Earth Day came out, Jill?
It was 2019.
Yeah, okay, so
yeah.
5 years ago. Jeff Goodell, he's a great journalist. The Heat Will Kill You First, I believe, is the title of his latest book. He traveled the world and got frightened. But when the climate scientists and the climate journalists get scared, that should tell you something. And there are many of these books out there, and we'll be putting them on my website soon when we get the next production going. Let's see, what else? Composting, please. There are so many ways to compost right now. Many cities, starting in San Francisco years ago, have compost pickup, meaning your green waste, food and garden, branches, the lawn you mow, all that can be put out on the curb. But if you don't have that option, anyone can compost in their kitchen. There are now a couple of companies. One is called Lomi. Another one is called The Mill, where you can have a very nice-looking, not smelly, not loud composter in your kitchen. The Mill, the Lomi is kind of a round, looks like a large salad bowl with a top on it, wooden composter. And The Mill looks like a nice, white, clean, high-tech garbage can. It's all enclosed, and you put your food waste in there. And if you don't have a garden to put the compost in, The Mill composter, they'll pick up your compost, which was food, every couple of weeks, and they will feed it to chickens. So there's no excuse anymore. By the way, the creator of The Mill was a co-creator of the iPhone, the iPod, and the Nest thermostat. So this guy knows what he's doing.
Oh,
Matt
boy.
Rogers. I'll give him a shout out. So composting is so important. Food waste is 40% of our food is wasted. And of course, when it goes to the landfill, it becomes methane. It absolutely contributes to climate change. And there's hungry people in our own communities. So food waste is a big issue. So be careful what you buy. But if you have leftovers, either give it to somebody. If you're, putting on events, or you're a restaurant or hotel, a lot of those places are giving it to food banks if they overestimated the number of people who would be eating. There's just no reason we should have so much food waste.
And it's time for a break. If you are just joining us, my guest is Betsy Rosenberg. Betsy is an independent radio host and producer who has conducted hundreds of interviews with leading eco-innovators and experts, and was also a network anchor in New York City. You are listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7, 89.5, and 89.7 FM. Many voices, one station. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Did you know that 6 corporations own 90% of the media in the United States? Isn't it about time we own some too? KSQD 90.7 FM, your community radio station, your voice, your concerns. Go to www.ksqd.org to get involved and support locally owned grassroots community media. K-Squid, KSQD FM.
We're back. And Betsy, there was a couple of interesting stories, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast here, that I just wanted to mention to you. And I know people remember stories. And one is the East Coast is sinking. You've read about that?
Well, it's not just Miami. That's right.
Well, the East Coast, it's New York. Right. A new analysis of satellite images and GPS sensors show that major cities along the U.S. East Coast are sinking, that are adding an alarming rate of the dangers posed by sea level rise. And, of course, we know the sea level rises because of our melting glaciers. And so we've now got one of the fastest sinking cities is Charleston, South Carolina. Charleston has suffered a sharp increase in tidal flooding during recent decades. That was one East Coast story that I don't think people realize. And then the other, this sort of falls under those unforeseen impacts that can just cost billions if we don't do the right thing soon. And locally here, that San Francisco back in World War II, Hunters Point and Alameda, they built a lot of the warships, a lot of the World War II ships, and those shipyards are now facing rising water levels and are starting to expose, because of the climate crisis and those waters rising, toxic materials that have long been buried at the site and are now coming to the surface. So, these are things, when we talk about, obviously, the planet as a whole and what's happening, but coast to coast, we have health issues, we have atmospheric rivers, the wildfires, the health issue, on and on. So, what are your thoughts about people getting overwhelmed? I even suffer from that.
Yes, okay, I'll give you a couple thoughts on that. One, we were in Rome 2 Junes ago. I know it sounds like I travel a lot, but I don't want to. My husband moved us from the Bay Area to Austin, the middle of the country. My daughter was living in New York before they just moved back to the North Bay. So I'll blame it on him. So I only went to Rome because I was on a panel, and I was asked to moderate a panel on EVs. Here's what happened. We were there. The river was so low that in places there was no water. And we'd been to Italy before, lucky enough to travel, do some bike trips. I've never seen that. I felt guilty when we would go to a restaurant. We stayed for a few extra days, of course, amortize all that fossil fuel that we burnt the plane coming over. And I felt guilty asking for a glass of water. So it's that bad, okay? They'd had some rain, but it came in the form of like a monsoon. So this is, of course, the examples of extreme weather. You can have drought and then too much water, and this is a really important point. That has damaged crops. So when I see people blaming Biden for high grocery prices, I say, do you know what a large part of the reason for high grocery prices? First of all, crops have been dying from the climate change you don't believe in. Also, people, how quickly they forget about the pandemic. There was a supply shortage. That has changed how systems get shipped and moved around.
And the war in Ukraine has affected a lot of the
geopolitics. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Geopolitics, the Houthis, and now, and it's wide-reaching, and if you start connecting those green dots, you'll perhaps be amazed. So I wanted to give another example. So my cousin, who lives just west of us, we're in hill country, he just put his house up for sale because he lives near a winery that wasn't there when he built his place 6 years ago, and he cannot stand part of it, he doesn't like all the loud music, but also they're wasting so much water. They're allowed to have a lot of water used to grow their grapes, have their winery, their vineyard, but he says they just water the lawn like all day long, and that was literally upsetting him. So those of us who are tuned in, it can be very hard. But most importantly, young people, I don't blame them for being angry and concerned.
And overwhelmed. How to cope with that. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Eco-anxiety is a real thing. And here's the cure for eco-anxiety, and I'm not just saying this. Start tuning in to places like what I've been talking about, or read up or watch a film. There's so many good ones. Find out what you can do, okay? And you start being part of the solution overnight. Immediately, you feel better, because that's what's kept me from stopping doing what I've done. It's been an uphill slog for sure, but I get more anxious when I'm not interviewing the experts who have all the wisdom that we need to tap into. So that really is a solution. And the other thing I say to young people when I have a chance to speak to them, high school students, college students, they expect, me to come in and talk about all the bad ecological climate news. I say, you guys are in the perfect position. You are right there poised, for green jobs that are being created, but you can go out and create one and do what I did, put a green twist on your, if you're looking to go into journalism or medicine or law, make it environmental law, become an environmental journalist, be a plant-based dietitian or nutritionist, or, teach environmental science, environmental studies. They didn't have that when we were in school or I was in school. They do now, but that still leaves a lot of adults who haven't been in a classroom in decades, a lot of information that they need. And that's why I frankly have focused my programs on people who are long since out of school, who still have many decades ahead of them, probably have kids, maybe grandkids, have a lot of disposable time and money. So eco-anxiety is real. I guess it's good news. There's more therapists, psychotherapists who are making it a specialty, climate anxiety. And I think I need one because it really can make you crazy. I say people say, you're so committed. I admire that. I say, I may end up committed before this is over, because you really do get, I see waste wherever I go, and I speak up whenever I can, and everybody needs to do that so I can be a little quieter and not embarrass my husband and daughter friends so often. We just have to talk about it because it's everybody's concern. So don't feel afraid. Do I have 30 seconds for another anecdote?
Of course, yes.
Okay, so when I've been in some motels or hotels, and it's not just those establishments, but they'll have a fireplace burning in the lobby. And in a couple of cases, it was the middle of the summer. This one that I remember most vividly was in Purchase, New York, and it was during swine flu, 2009. I hope they're not still doing it. I was holed up with my daughter because she had gone to camp in Maine, and the swine flu broke out, and I had to go pick her up and bring her to where her friend lived. We were in this motel for a week, and it was in the 80s, sunny. It was July, and yet the fireplace was wasting gas. Okay, and I said something to the manager. Why are you doing this? He has ambiance. I said, ambiance? It's the middle of summer. I said, do me a favor. Just stop burning the fireplace, at least in the summer months, and see if you get complaints. If you get complaints, I'm wrong. You're right. So he turned it off for a couple of days. I said, did anyone complain? You know, a fireplace in July? No. You got to speak up, people, okay, because it all adds up. Every ton of greenhouse gases matters, okay? And there's just too much waste, right? You get on a plane and you say, I don't need a styrofoam second cup for my refill for coffee. Just use the same cup, please. It all matters.
Well, one thing you reminded me of was a Stephen Covey, Dr. Stephen Covey concept, which is circle of concern and circle of influence. And circle of concern, he was talking about that you're concerned about this issue, and you might have sleepless nights. It might be making you sick, worried, anxious, because you are concerned about whatever the issue is. We're talking about, the climate crisis on the show, but it could be anything. But then he said, think of the circle of influence. What can you influence about that? And that's how you get your power back. That's how you get your sleep back. That's how you lower your anxiety, is picking some part of, as we're talking about the climate crisis, some part of the issue that you can work on. And
that's right.
and it might very well be writing letters to the media and getting that 1% bumped up to 2% or 3%,
that's right.
Or letting them know that it was only 1%. You want to hear more stories about this.
So two quick things. I know we're running close to the end of the hour, and thank you so much for having me and letting me talk too much. But if anyone's interested in helping me get media on, please email me, Betsy at BetsyRosenberg.com. Go to BetsyRosenberg.com to find out what I'm doing next, and we'll put some resources up there for you. But the most important thing you can do is vote. And we have a major election, which is a major critical moment in not only our country, but the planet's future. And if you do nothing else, go door to door to tell people about climate change and why it matters. We're not telling you to vote for, but vote for the candidate that understands this is a real problem and has done quite a bit about it.
It is a decisive moment in time. It's either democracy or autocracy, or a healthy planet, or one that's going to die. Thank you, Betsy, for being our bold and impressive guest today. Thank you for joining us on Be Bold America. What's next on Be Bold America? Please join us on Sunday, April 21st, for another Earth Month topic, Preventing and Healing Climate Traumas, Building Resilience and Hope in Communities. The climate emergency is often described as a wicked problem, one that results from numerous factors that interact in new and surprising ways to defy standard solutions. The pervasive distresses and traumas it generates are also wicked problems that cannot be resolved through conventional, professionally delivered, individualized clinical treatment services. Facing our climate future will require entire neighborhoods and communities to be engaged to prevent and heal the distresses and traumas generated during the long climate mega emergency. If whole community initiatives are launched throughout industrialized nations and worldwide, the indomitable human spirit and capacity for resilience can be activated. On April 21st, Bob Doppelt, founder of the Transformational Resilience Coalition, a network of mental health, social service, disaster management, climate and faith organizations and professionals, will join Be Bold America to discuss his newest book that is a guide for building resilience and hope in communities. Please join Be Bold America on Sunday, April 21st at 5 p.m. to hear how you can build resilience and hope in your neighborhood. As a reminder, Be Bold America is available as a podcast. Now you may listen to the show anytime for free by subscribing through your favorite podcast platform. You may also get the podcast link sent directly to you by signing up for Be Bold America's news group. Just send me an email at bebold@ksqd.org. I want to give a special thank you to Be Bold America program engineer Eliza James and our station's program director Howard Feldstein. You are listening to KSQD Santa Cruz and KSQT Prunedale. Many voices, one station. Listen worldwide online at ksqd.org. Stay tuned for State of Mind with Deborah Schloss. My name is Jill Cody, and thank you for listening to Be Bold America. Until next time, keep, stop, start.